Okay, it's a pleasure to introduce Daniela Marrone, talking about some philological and lexicographic topics in Thomas Linacre's medical discourse.
Yes. I'm going to come back to the origin of the study of medicine in Great Britain, and I would like to speak. I'd like to deal with the following three items: the classical and medical education of Linacre in Italy, and the return to his homeland and his achievements, and the philological and lexicographic topics in Linacre's prefaces. And because of the 100 Years' War, British students could not travel from Oxford and Cambridge to Paris to pursue their studies, so Italian university became their final destination instead. Some of these students lived the experience of Italian humanism with great enthusiasm and brought back its ideology and culture to their own country. Among them was one, Thomas Linacre, the most educated man of his generation and an important representative of European medical humanism. His fame is mainly due to two aspects. He was the founder and first chairman of the Royal College of Physicians of London, an institution which was bound in 1518 to regulate the medical profession. Then he was one of the most famous translators from Greek into Latin of some of Galen's works, versions of which are generally appreciated for their elegant style and for the precision of his Latin, a language he also devoted his studies to. In fact, he wrote a Latin grammar, Progymnasmata Grammatices Vulgaria, then another shorter Latin grammar textbook in English, Rudimenta Grammatices, for his own student, Princess Mary, the future Queen of England, Mary I, and then a treatise on Latin syntax, De Emendata Structura Latini Sermonis. For a better understanding of how Linacre achieved all this, we will need to go through, however briefly, the main steps of his life and his journey through Italy. A series of favorable events allowed Linacre to approach and get to know some of the most important representatives of Italian humanism who influenced his future choices. According to tradition, Linacre was born in Canterbury in 1460 and received his first schooling in the monastery of Christ Church. Later on, he moved to Oxford, where he became a fellow of the All Souls College, and where he met William Grocyn, who taught him the basics of Greek. He must have immediately shown a great aptitude for the language, since Grocyn had decided to translate Aristotle with the Linacre's help. And the young English scholar was very close to William Selling, prior of Christ Church Monastery in Canterbury, who had studied in Padua and Bologna. Selling returned to Italy on a number of diplomatic missions, and in 1487 he traveled to the country with the promising Linacre. In Florence, the two men went their separate ways, Selling going on to Rome, while Linacre stayed in Florence and lived there for over 2 years, a stay which proved crucial for his own education. Here, in fact, Linacre studied Greek with Demetrio Calcondila and Angelo Poliziano, the most distinguished Hellenists of the late 15th century. Linacre was also fellow student of Lorenzo de' Medici, son, John Giovanni, later to become Pope Leo X, and to him he would dedicate a translation from Galen. Linacre had been in Italy for about 5 years, and we have evidence that he visited Bologna and Rome to examine ancient manuscripts in the city's libraries. In 1492, he started his medical studies at University of Padua and graduated in August 1496, when he carried out his final discussion with precision and clarity. And this is the degree, the official act of the degree. I believe And we can ask, why did Linacre study medicine? I believe a greater relevance for his choice should be given to Linacre's relationships with his Florentine tutors, Calcondila and Poliziano, who were also interested in studying ancient medical texts with a philological approach. Besides that, we may also assume he moved to Padua because of the high reputation the Faculty of Arts and Medicine of his university enjoyed at the time. Before 1496, Linacre was also to be found in Venice, where he probably lived for some time, and we have evidence of various nature proving that a real scientific collaboration existed between Linacre and the humanist and printer Aldo Manuzio. Traces of Linacre's works are to be found in an important publication by Manuzio, the one of the Greek Aristotle in 5 volumes. In the second one, the printer includes a letter which can be dated back to February 1497. It is clear that the printer held him in great esteem. Linacre is the first of his contributors to be mentioned and praised as homo et Grece et Latine peritissimus, and so on, a man who knows Greeks and Latin perfectly well and excels in all disciplines. It is also interesting to notice the illustrated edition of Ancient Astronomers, published by Manuzio in 1499. It included also the first edition in Greek of the Sphera, attributed to Proclo, accompanied by Linacre's Latin translation. And now I will speak on Linacre's return to his home. I have just highlighted the recognition by Italian humanists of Linacre's remarkable erudition, but what recognition and achievements did he get at home? Linacre soon gained fame as a physician and educator. At Oxford, at the age of almost 40, he received the validation of the degree obtained in Italy and the title of medical doctor. Remaining for a couple of years in Oxford, working as a grammar teacher and as a doctor, Linacre made friends with 2 men destined to become famous throughout Europe, Desiderius Erasmus and Sir Thomas More. The latter was first a pupil of Linacre and then his dear friend. Erasmus arrived in Oxford in 1499, where he remained for almost 7 months and owed his knowledge of Greek to Linacre, his master. They were epistolary correspondents, and according to some scholars, in a passage from the Encomium of Madness, Erasmus makes a clear reference to Linacre, describing him as a 60-year-old man, Greek scholar, Latinist, mathematician, philosopher, and doctor. Furthermore, he praises him in some of his letters. In these years, Linacre strove to ensure that the University of Oxford and Cambridge had chairs of Greek for the reading of ancient texts, including medical ones, especially those that could have an application in clinical medicine. After the period at Oxford, Linacre moved to London, first becoming a private tutor to Prince Arthur, son of the future King Henry VIII, and later, with the latter's succession to the throne in 1509, personal physician to the king. For some years, he assisted many of London's most renowned people as well. In 1518, he founded and was first chairman of the Royal College of Physicians, which was founded to regulate medical profession in London. Before Linacre's new design took shape, only a modest part of so-called practical doctors could be said to be competent. Very few were medical graduates and mostly ecclesiastics. The situation was not entirely without rules, since the license to practice medicine and surgery had long been conferred upon the church. However, medicine was actually in the hands of barbers, surgeons, pharmacists, charlatans, over whose activity there was little control. The College of Physicians could license the practice of medicine in and around London. Anyone who did not receive such permission from the president of the college, with the exception of Oxford and Cambridge graduates, was prohibited from practicing medicine. 4 years later, in 1522, these measures were extended to the whole country. The Royal College served not only to protect the interests of the profession, but was at the time lively and active, never generating it a picturesque formality. This was possible thanks to the principle on which the college was founded. Those who were elected members of the college not only had to possess technical competence and respect professional ethics, but they also had to demonstrate excellent knowledge. In addition to a graduation in medicine, a proficiency in Latin and familiarity with Galen's works. This decision was undoubtedly inspired by Linacre and the influence of his formative period in Italy. There, he met circles of scholars who dedicated themselves to the advancement of knowledge, not in a narrow and specialized sense, but with wide-ranging interests. In other words, Linacre created the conditions for dressing and adorning the renewed medical studies with the humanistic spirit. In this way, the English doctor found favor with those contemporaries who wanted to participate in this emancipation and be seen as patrons of an important cultural promotion at the court of Henry VIII. Erasmus praised the learning of the English court and characterized it as an humanistic museum. He says museion from ancient Greek, placed sacred to the muses. And now the third item. Linacre is presented by his contemporaries as a man who embodies many of the values and qualities of humanism. He knows and practices medicine, is the author of grammar textbooks, is a lecturer in Greek and Latin, adopts the most modern philological criticism as translator from Greek into Latin, and finally he professes himself in a broader sense a man of letters. The Latin versions from Galen, of which Linacre had worked for at least 2 decades, were published one after the other within 7 years until the year of his death, 1524. This is the titles. Linacre's method of working is comparable to the philological method popular among humanist scholars at the end of the 15th century. We know that he tried to base his translations on having as his source a reliable Greek text as close as possible to Galen's original. To achieve this, he says, one had to make sure one was working with a good Greek witness and possibly collated with other witnesses of the text. The translation on the preservation of health is prefaced by a succinct letter to the reader that gives important information on Linacre's philological method. With regard to the scientific terminology employed in the translation, he claims that coining new terms in Latin is only a last resort and that the use of Greek words is limited as much as possible. Like other translators of the time, he tries to justify his use of linguistic innovations and the recourse to Greek terms. Even if marginally, Linacre touches on a topic of broad implication, that is, the discussion of the presumed greater lexical potential of the Greek language compared to the Latin one. Furthermore, at the end of the letter, he makes some remarks saying he decided to include within brackets his own addition to the text. Using expression and terms of the new philological language of the humanists, he says he had filled the gaps of the text suo marte with his own strength and had made use of his own judicium, his own judgment. His additions, that may vary in length, are not inserted tacitly, but they are declared and well recorded according to his philological attitude. A copy of his translation today held by the Royal College is quite exceptional, as the verso of the title page carries Linacre's autographed dedication to Richard Fox, Bishop of Winchester and founder of Corpus Christi College in Oxford. Moreover, Linacre's handwriting can be seen several other times on the printed text. Sometimes it is corrections of translation choices or printing mistakes or incorrect punctuation. We assume a man with such an innate sense of precision as Linacre wanted to present his friend with the neatest possible copy. In short, his method of working was painstakingly accurate. Before translating, Linacre critically inspected his source text, searching for errors, collating it with other witnesses, filling in possible omissions, and finally suggesting amendments. My analysis of some of these translations confirms also that he was influenced by some discussion on medical languages opened by the Italian humanists, and especially Angelo Poliziano. To conclude, in 1520, Linacre had taken holy orders and left the medical profession to devote himself mainly to his studies. Only in 1523 did he accept his last position at court as tutor and physician to Princess Mary, the future Mary I. But he actually wanted to concentrate his efforts on the translation of Galen, and I also believe that his commitment as a translator hides higher ambitions. In fact, he often presents the results of his translating work as a useful service to literature and not exclusively to medicine. The reader, he claims, could add to his literary interest the new text of Galen, so that it is clear that Linacre doesn't perceive the disciplinary boundary between literature and medicine. At this hand, it's significant what he wrote in 1521 in a letter to Pope Leo X, who was Giovanni de' Medici, fellow students of Linacre in Florence. To him, he dedicated the translation of the treatise on mixtures and on uneven bad temperament, and Linacre recalls his Florentine period spent together with Giovanni, now particularly generous toward him, and then twice professes to be a man of letters. He says, I realized that literature was the only kind of service through which my talents would allow me to attempt to do so. These seem to be absolutely suitable, both for me, who is left with almost nothing else but literature, and for you, who are a very eminent man of letters. It seems certain that the changes taking place within the medical disciplines in England were pedagogically important for Linacre. This is confirmed by his commitment as founder of the Royal College and the establishment in Oxford and Cambridge of Greek chairs for the reading of medical texts. But it is also seems that in his last years of life, Linacre's priority is not standing out as a physician, title which he generally doesn't use anymore, but rather grafting his name into the ever more luxuriant plant of philology in the attractive garden of the humanae litterae. Thank you for your attention.
That talk actually intersects quite nicely with the comment I made at the end of the old paper, in that what we have here, I think, is a very good example of the study of the processes of productions of texts, and that you can focus on a key individual who is well connected to the elites and therefore has left us quite a rich textual record of his interaction with other intellectuals, so that you're able to do the work that you've done, which is actually tracing some of the influences on his translations. And we also have his own words, which of course we don't for a lot of the authors that we've looked at. So in terms of sort of an analysis, a sort of autobiography, where we can look back at the processes of production of a significant text and other text later on, it's a very good example, I think, of how far we can push it, because in this case, you've got quite an extreme example where there's a lot of evidence left about that author. So we can then cast light on some of the other authors, perhaps, where we don't have quite as much evidence and say, well, this was possible at that time. So I really enjoyed listening to the paper from that perspective and seeing you sort of weaving these links between these people and showing how discourse at the time was transnational, went across disciplines. The individuals didn't necessarily associate themselves with one profession. Was this failing to distinguish or a lack of distinction between medicine and other areas of humanism, etc. So it was an absolutely fascinating insight. So I can thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions that people may have? Where did you find those magnificent pictures, by the way, of the two Italians? It looks like it's from a fresco somewhere.
Okay, which one?
The two Italians that we can.
Okay.
Like it's a fresco. There was one of them. They just put it in past.
Yes, I think they are now in Florence, but I don't remember exactly.
Like frescoes to be.
Yes, yes.
Like it's going to be some marvelous old building.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, okay.
Slightly faded quality of frescoes, but
okay, okay. Don't remember exactly.
Anyway, delightful.
Sorry.
Absolutely delightful. Well, if there are no further questions, take my very deep appreciation of your paper. I enjoyed listening to it thoroughly. I found out a lot about an important historical figure, and also just how far it might be possible to push autobiographies in the study of this type of work. So thank you very much.